Grab your beverages and turn up your interweb. Solving the world's problems 12 ounces at a time. It's Dudes and Beer.
Well, hello everybody, and welcome to episode 299 of the Dudes and Beer podcast. My sweet baby Jesus, everybody. I cannot believe that we have made it this far. I have so many people to thank next week. Whatever you do, do not miss next week's episode. Tonight is going to be awesome. Next week is going to be epic. We are going old school Dudes and Beer, folks. We are talking 300 minutes of episode 300. That is over 5 hours. As of right now, everything that I have pre-recorded from guests, one guest was all the way in China. We will be doing some really hard topics. I'm not going to lie, everybody. Trigger alert. We will be having Billy Joe Kane in studio with us for Medical Imp, the Education Foundation. We will be talking, of course, as always, with him about human trafficking, what we can do to educate ourselves, educate our communities, what we can do to help people empathize with those that have been trafficked, how to recognize that they have been trafficked, how to help them out. We'll be learning a lot about that. We'll also be having a remote guest with us via pre-record. Mitchell Gerber will be joining us talking about illegal organ harvesting on behalf of the Chinese government, on behalf of specifically the Communist Party over there. And it is some mind-blowing information, everybody. That's why I'm saying trigger alert. Like, I know some of you listened with your, older kids, things like that. I'm cool with that, man, because there's some knowledge in here. But I'm here to tell you some of the videos that we play during that are hard. They're hard to watch. They are hard to listen to. It's not easy to hear people go before the UN and say, yeah, we thought maybe this was a joke. It's not. So it's going to be crazy. We're also going to have, in addition to that, our good friend Dr. John Hall coming on. And then finally, the anchor of the show, we will be having the indefatigable mind of Dr. Robert Duncan. He is one of the original people who helped the CIA figure out the electronic means by which to hack into the human brain, things like that. We will be talking about subliminal technologies. We will be talking about voice of God technologies, all kinds of great stuff. I'm telling you, man, episode 300 is going to be beyond belief. So tune in. Before we get into our guest tonight, see how I almost did that? I almost threw in, we have a sponsor to talk about. Please, everybody, do not forget, the Dudes of Beer podcast is now officially brought to you by podcastcadet.com. If you're a fan of podcasting like I am, want to start up a podcast for your friends, family, fun, church, school, business, whatever, stop on by podcastcadet.com today. That is the website for you. Everything from A to Z, soup to nuts, that is what they do. They are a one-stop shop that hooks you up with one-on-one consulting, everything from podcast workshops, training, podcast consultation. If you're getting ready to launch a show, how do you brand it? How do you get all that in line? How do you get an intro and outro made? How do you license music? Everything. How do you get your podcast edited? How do you distribute and monetize? They do all of it. They'll teach you how to do all of it. Stop on by today. Podcastcadet.com is the website. Dudes20 is the code that you want to use to save 20% off of your membership over at podcastcadet.com. Now, our guest today, authors of 2 books, one in my hands, another one on my shelf, I think, or no, it's out front. And then 2 more on the way. The book that we will be talking about this evening, The Gift of Past Lives, with Mother Mother Isabella, God and Elizabeth, David Bettenhausen and Carla Bogni-Kidda. How are you guys doing this evening? Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having us. We're great.
Yep, we're doing great. Thanks.
Absolutely, man. I have been looking forward to having this conversation. The topic of reincarnation is honestly one that I have been fascinated with for years, for decades even. It was a popular topic that I used to love to listen to and listen about on Coast to Coast AM back in the day with Art Bell. And there were some wild stories. And the more that I got to reading about Hebrew mysticism, the more I got to reading about Kabbalah, things like that, I really started to learn that a lot of these things, reincarnation within bloodlines, that kind of stuff, is fully believed in. And like it's in the Talmud, all that kind of stuff. And to see that many ancient cultures and even many modern cultures today carry on that tradition of thought of reincarnation. And we're really going to deep dive here into reincarnation, into past life regression, because don't forget, folks, two different things. So, welcome to the show, guys. Let's, I guess, start at the beginning. David, if you want to just give us a little bit of history, how did you guys come to meet?
Back in 1998, I graduated, from my residency. I graduated from medical school, went to residency. I bought a practice. Carla was the office manager. She soon became my best friend, and we worked every day. We had up to 6 employees, but most of the time it was 4 of us working in the office in a small private practice. And in 2014, the government basically pushed us into electronic medical records, which means we had to change everything. We were a little old school with paper and pen. And I became a little bit stressed, a little bit irritable. I was spending 12, 14 hours a day on the computer trying to keep up. I got up at 5 in the morning and started opening charts and setting things up. And then the girls would come into the office. Carla would try to talk to me, and I was grouchy and didn't want to talk.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And where did things go from there? I guess, at what point did y'all start having a shared experience along this journey of life?
Well, there was a day when I was actually reading an AARP magazine about meditation. And I had meditated years before, but I had a Catholic upbringing, and I was always told that meditation could conjure up, things you didn't want. So it kind of frightened me, and I got away from it. But with Dave being in the mood that he was in, he normally was like, Fred Flintstone or Yogi Bear, a combination of the two. He was really fun-loving, but he was just so impossible, and something had to be done. So I brought the magazine in one day, and I said, Dave, you have to do something. I talk to you, you don't listen. And I can call a counselor if you wish, or what do you think about meditating as an office? And he said, yeah, let's try to meditate. So we decided we were going to meditate, and it happened, this was like May of 2014, we started to meditate. Dave?
Uh-huh.
Yep, and it was absolutely fantastic. I was used to staring at a computer for 14 hours a day. I had almost forgotten what it was like to talk to patients because the computer was overwhelming. Most of us got a lot better at doing this down the line, but to start with, it was horrible. And so I was still getting up at 5, but at 8 o'clock, we shut off all the computers. Carla lit a candle, played some music, sat back, relaxed. It was peaceful. I actually felt better when I jumped up and went down to see patients. And that was great until the third day. The other girls in the office said, we're not going to come in early. Carla still showed up. We were meditating, and I'm sitting there, and I thought this woman was talking to me. And she showed me a shoe, and she was happy, jovial. And when I looked at her from a side view, it reminded me of Carla, and I suddenly knew it was Carla's mother. Now, the part of the thing that was a little strange is Carla's mother had died 20 years before then. And so...
Now, how did you know that it was Carla's mother, just out of curiosity?
Because of the way she looked, acted, I just knew it was Carla's mother. And I came in right after we turned off the music, and I said, Carla, I don't want you to think I'm completely crazy. Again, I'm a physician, so I thought I was maybe crazy. But I said, I think I was talking to your mother, or at least I saw your mother. And she looked like you from a side view because of the eyelashes, and she kept showing me a shoe. And Carla went over to the computer, brought up shoes on the computer screen, and there were 60 pair of shoes there. And she says, okay, tell me what shoe it was. So I walked over and I said, it's that shoe. And Carla looked at me and said, that's my mother's shoe.
That was the shoe that she had worn her whole life. She was a ballroom dancer, and she had worn it not just for ballroom dancing, but like if she was dressing up or going out or to church. It was an open-toed sandal. And my sister also worked in the office with us at the time, and we looked at each other and thought, how could he get that right out of all of those? That was like not even possible.
Yeah.
And then my sister went and got a picture of my mother out of her purse, and she brought it up to Dave, and she showed it to Dave, and Dave teared up. And we said, what's the matter? And he said, that's who I was talking to. And it was a picture of my mother from when she was in her late 40s.
Now, I myself am somebody who, I've said it on this show numerous times, the reason I have people on with what seem like extraordinary stories is because I myself have experienced the extraordinary. I myself have been there when more than one person has experienced the extraordinary at the same time in the same place. And just things that I cannot explain, even with my own literally devious and crafty mind. If I can't think of a way to fake it, I might give it a little bit of credence, So for me, it's one of those. It's more to me that people have to disprove somebody's story than somebody has to prove their story to me. But one of the questions that I have to ask is, how do you know at that point, David, that you see her mother, that you're seeing Carla's mother in front of you, that is not a recollection from your past life in general, I guess? Like,
okay.
Is that like a connection to the other side that we're talking about, or is it like a connection to your past life, like across time, that we're talking about?
That's a pretty good question, Chris, because we'll tell you a little bit more about our experience, but what we have found is we found Carla's mother in many past lives.
We've taken turns.
Yes.
With
and so
being mother.
Yeah. And I found Carla in multiple past lives. And even though we haven't really explained to the listeners yet what happened, we found 29 lives that Carla and I have shared.
Wow.
Some relationship together.
And I just have to ask, as somebody who loves scientific instruments, loves the experiment, things like that. Were all of these recollections taken by different people at the same time? Like, how did the recollections come about, I suppose?
Well, we kept meditating because first Carla and Paula wanted to see if we could meditate again and see if their mother would talk to us again. And
Sure.
she did. And then we had times where another woman appeared to me, and she told me her name was Isabella. And Isabella said, "I'm your spirit guide, and I have been with you for 6,000 years. And I was like, okay. Now, I don't know who this is. At least I had a reference for Carla's mother.
Yeah.
And she says, "You've had many lives, and I've always been there in all of them." And I thought, okay. So I'm sharing that with Carla, and we keep meditating every day.
And journaling everything.
And I start getting visions of a Mayan temple. I got visions of these little stuffed squirrels in a room once. I got Civil War stories, little bitty blips of things. And then I had a day where I was meditating, and I was standing suddenly in a dark alley. And I looked across the room.
The
alley, and there was Carla standing in this dark alley. And she was dressed like a flapper, and she didn't look exactly like Carla, but from her steel blue eyes, I knew it was her. And I saw a flash of light. I felt something hit me in the chest. I was thrown back, and I realized I was lying in a rainy, wet alley, bleeding to death and dying because I was shot.
Oh, wow.
He actually fell out of bed when he had that vision at home.
Yeah. And so I kept meditating, and more parts of the story kept coming. And I found out that I had met this flapper named Ruby Donaldson at a wedding of a man named Angelo, who was a mobster that the flapper worked for. And we took this long walk along the beach in Chicago, and it was in the 1920s. And Ruby Donaldson talked about coming from Georgia and how someday she wanted to be a dressmaker and go back to Atlanta. And I was a little junior banker who had just started working half teller, half banker in a little bank. And I got an invitation to this wedding. Well, Carla's a very curious woman. So what did you do, Carla?
Well, I had a day when I was not at work, and I thought I'd Google and see what I could come up with. I got onto Ancestry.com, and I did indeed find a Ruby Donaldson. That's a common name in Georgia, by the way, but I did find Ruby Donaldson, born in 1904, to James and Anna Donaldson. Now, luckily, Dave had gotten those two names, James and Anna Donaldson, from Isabella, because that's how I tied it all together. Ruby was one of 11 children, and I could find pictures of her parents, but I couldn't find any pictures of Ruby. But I also found articles on the wedding of Angelo Genna, who was the head gangster right before Al Capone in Little Italy in Chicago. And the article was about the wedding to Lucille Spagnola, who he married on January the 10th, 1925. So that confirmed some more information that Dave had been given. And then I found another article. It was actually a picture of his wedding cake, and the wedding cake was over 10 feet tall. In the picture, there were two women standing next to it, and it served over 3,000 people. It was huge. But anyway, I called Dave immediately, and I said, these names, I found them, and I found a picture of Angelo and, read up on who Angelo Genna was. I had never heard of him. And it was just more things for us to write down. We were journaling everything, every picture he got, every name he got. We journaled everything so that we could draw the dots or the lines together later.
Yeah. And with both of you having these experiences, I would assume Carla before David. Just because, Carla, you seem like you were familiar with the experience and what David was experiencing when he came to you and when the meditation started.
I've always been rather open-minded, and I've been to mediums in the past, years ago, and more than once, several. And Dave had not done that. He really was a good Catholic boy. Still is, pure as the driven snow. But my question was, why is my mother coming to you and not me? But we found out the reason to that later. Dave is the one that has this phenomenal gift to be able to speak to the spiritual world, to his spirit guide, to his angels, to everybody. I can a little bit, I can hear them, but I can't do it the way Dave can. Dave can actually go to a life and relive it. And it's amazing. I've taped him. I've put him under before and done past life regression on him. Previous to me even knowing how to do it, I did it and I taped it. And then later on, after we were schooled in it. So Dave has this fantastic gift. He's very, very lucky, fortunate, blessed to have it.
And I am one that believes everybody has the gift to an extent. It's really just a muscle that we have to learn to flex.
Correct. I think that's absolutely the case. There's some connection we can all do. And I don't think I'm anything special except that my experience has been special.
Well, and that's one thing that I wanted to get into real quick with you, David, because I know for me, after my religious ecstatic experiences, things like that, I've, of course, been on a spiritual path since I was before 17, and I'm 45 now. And whether it was teaching other people spirituality, religion, things like that, or teaching myself in other religions and spiritualities. That's why I'm much more of a spiritual person now, because I've really just read gobs and gobs and gobs of religious texts from thousands of years of different cultures and faiths, and I just can't ascribe to a hellfire and damnation. I just cannot.
Me either.
Yeah, and Chris,
I think God's a little bit hipper than that. I don't know.
Yeah,
yes.
And Chris, this is one of those lessons, because we've learned so many lessons during this process, and really we spent 5 years journaling everything before we started to write a book.
Wow. Well, and sorry, go ahead.
That's okay. The very first real lesson is there is no hell.
Yeah.
And there's something pretty liberating about that in general.
Sure.
And
the only hell is the one that we ascribe ourselves to.
That's right. We
That's
create
it.
ourselves.
Correct.
You choose to live in one yourself. Congratulations for the self-fulfilling prophecy, I suppose. I lived that hell for like 20 years of my life almost. I'm good with it. Thanks.
Yeah, me too.
Me too.
At some point, like when I left and moved to Maine, it was, okay, I've spent the last better than a decade of my life in service of something greater than myself, helping other people. I think it's time to be in service of something greater than myself and help me now.
Yes.
Because I can't even think about helping other people if I'm not okay.
That's right.
That's right. And that's part of whatever you want to call all the lessons that we've learned during reincarnation. It is really down to that. How do you become your best self?
Yeah. Yeah.
How do you get off the wheel so you're not continuing to reincarnate forever? And I don't care, Chris, if people want to say source, Tao,
I don't care if you want to say the dog next door.
God, whatever you want to call.
Jog has gone backwards.
That's it.
That's right.
Like, hey, man, it's literally about the point of surrender and understanding that you can only control what you can directly run to. Aside
Correct.
from that, you have very little control over the world, and you need to learn to recognize that and appreciate it. And when I say appreciate, I mean capital A. Appreciate that.
Yes.
Like, if you're in one of those positions, like I've finally hit a point in my career on the road where my job is, when I come into a strange town, to spot the talent among me and delegate them in charge of stuff. That's my job. And it's great because, yeah, you kind of learn this aspect of, I don't have to control it for it to go right. I just have to trust the right people to do what they know how to do for it to go right.
Yeah.
And again, Chris, you're right. And it's really not even what happens to you in life. It's how you react to it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I really wanted to ask you, David, because I know for myself, after those hard spiritual experiences that I had, both the visceral and the aftermath. And when I say aftermath, like literally aftermath, like there is a wearing out that can happen where you feel just scooped out inside.
Yeah.
And after that, how is your experience? I know for me, one of the things that I ended up doing a lot of was dream work, and I'm getting back into the habit now. It's been a little tough, moving the muscles and getting them flexing again, but I've been working again on my way back to sleep and been focusing on something. And I used to love, doing night work. Whenever I was asleep, I would go to sleep with the intent of answering a question.
I think that is absolutely beautiful, Chris. And if you want to talk a little bit about even the medical theory here,
sure.
Whether you're talking about meditation, where you go into the right wavelengths, which the delta theta waves and all of that as you're falling asleep. Those are the same waves that happen during meditation, and those are actually the same brain waves that start to come in when you're having past life regression hypnosis.
Interesting.
It's all reaching the same subconscious level. And if you talk about Buddhist thought, they're talking about non-attachment and all of those things. It's really a matter of reaching the subconscious where you've been programmed everything. Now, whether that's programmed by your parents, programmed by your past lives, programmed by your schools, programmed by your churches, all of that, it's all in your subconscious. And it starts even at a very, very visceral level. We actually know that there's a modular theory in the brain. And so if you touch something that's hot, your hand pulls back. The next time you touch something hot, your hand actually comes back faster.
Yeah.
Because your subconscious actually records all of those positive and negative experiences throughout your life. If you've had past lives, of course, your experiences are still shared in that same subconscious level. And so what we're really doing for past life regression or meditation like mine, where I had spontaneous memories, is we're actually accessing the programming that's happened years and years and years before.
And by programming, and there's two ways to view this, folks. And I'm trying to remember offhand, Doctor, what is your degree in?
Oh, I was a nurse, went back to medical school, and then I was a podiatrist.
There it is. It doesn't matter, though. You are a medical doctor. That's.
Yes,
I didn't know if you were a doctor of medicine. If you were a doc, I couldn't remember if you were a doctor of medicine or psychiatry. Doesn't matter to me, like, if your specialty was feet, you graduated from the same place, man. Some people have a hang-up about that. I'm like, you know what he is? A doctor. You know what you're not? A doctor. So
anybody can be a doctor. You just have to go to school.
That's right. You gotta hang in. Like, hey, I tell people I went to school long enough to be a doctor. I just don't have a degree.
That's right.
Yes.
I spent a lot of money. But one of the questions that I have for you is, I guess, as people experience, like you're saying, does everybody have past life experience, or do only some people have past life experience? Is it a fact of, I could almost psychologically flip the concept of experience and turn it into almost trauma, that's what sticks around? You know, almost that.
Again, Chris, that's a really good comment. Because during past life regression and even spontaneous memories, or those memories that children have that are spontaneous, and we can talk about that.
Oh, yeah. I definitely want to talk about that.
Because what happens is, most of the time, the traumatic memories are the memories everybody gets first.
Yeah.
They're the easiest to remember. They're the time you were shot. It's the time you died at war.
Sure.
So people have more Civil War memories or some great Roman battle memories because those things were traumatic to you.
Well, yeah, and because those things not only were traumatic, they were formative to you in some way. They were, and we talk about it a lot on this show, the filters through which we see reality, and those filters are set up through the reality of our experience and what we've lived and what we see. And that's I guess kind of the crux of the philosophic issue that I'm getting to is, you know, there is that old school dharmic principle of karma and the fact of you will keep coming back until you learn the lesson that you're supposed to learn.
And again, that's 100% where we be taking this, Chris, is, again, if you remember, all the positive and all the negative experiences are recorded in your present life. What past life regression and some of this shows is that they're recorded in your previous lives. So you certainly have all these positive and negative experiences that you may not be aware of, but they're still recorded, they still affect you, and they still lead to your next karma.
Absolutely. And it's the same way that our brains dream at night and process the reality that we just walk straight through. We were busy staying upright, breathing, you know, seeing the stop sign in front of us. We weren't busy hearing the bird in the background that might have triggered a memory from our childhood. But our dream remembers it. Our brain remembers it.
And a lot of dreams are past life memories.
Interesting. That was one of the points that I was trying to get to here. So I'm glad that you kind of brought us around to that facet of the gem and really full circle into that whole comment of dream work, because I think it really is, like we were saying before, all of us have the capacity to tap into the other. Whether or not, would it be the case that we all have past life experience in that way, Carla?
Yes, everybody, except for those souls that are still waiting to come for the first time.
Wow.
And there are some that are still waiting. Everybody has past lives. And the only way you don't, Jesus and Mohammed were the only two that did it one time and remained up there until we learn to be not conceited, not jealous, not selfish, always forgiving and always loving. We will continue to be the gerbils running on the wheel, coming down here, trying to catch our tail until we learn to not be jealous, conceited, selfish, and to always forgive and be loving.
Okay. And I guess at that point, there does beg the question that I would have to ask, because I know way too many like really hard realists that would be like, all right, so why are you still here then?
Well, sometimes I say I'm a slow learner.
That's exactly what I'd say. You know, some of us are more stubborn than others.
If you did read the book,
yes,
or part of our book, and in the back, after each one of the 21 lives in the first book, we do tell why we came back.
Yeah.
Because we didn't do what we were supposed to. It's not easy.
No.
It's easy to be selfish. It's
That's
easy
right.
to be conceited.
That's right.
And it's really, really hard. And I ask myself every day, every time I do something, is that conceited? Is that being selfish? It's an ongoing thing.
And it is not an easy thing to do, to look at oneself in the flash bright mirror that it is and say, is what I'm doing self-serving? Is what I'm doing ultimately for my, not necessarily for my own good, but for my own aggrandizement? Because, like, for your own good could very well be like, hey, yeah, man, $500, as long as you're doing somebody right, you know. But if you're being shifty and trying to steal from people or things like that, it will come about.
Well, knowing that we've had 6,000 lives, Dave and I mean 6,000 years of lives.
Wow.
You know, I'm getting a little tired. I'd like to graduate.
Well, here's a question for you, Carla. Are all of those lives bound to this earth, to this reality?
Yes.
Okay. Interesting. Dave, same with you?
Absolutely. All 42 lives are here. The first one is almost, again, a little over 6,000 years ago. Every one of the lives that we found has been an earthbound life. I'm going to make a different point just to... Go ahead. Because I think it's really, when you look back at your past lives, you realize how many things you keep doing wrong the same way. It's probably not much different than if you look back on the history of mankind, just how stupid we've been, that we keep fighting each other, that we keep injuring each other, that we're destroying the planet. All of those are lessons that you start to learn when you start doing past life work at any kind. You know, we found out that I've been Scottish and I was fighting the English, and the very next life I was English fighting the Scottish.
See what you get?
So some part of that's karma, and some part of that is compassion. You start to realize, I'm literally fighting myself.
Yeah.
And that's the point that you start to learn. I don't even think you probably always have to know what your past life was, as long as you stop fighting yourself.
I think that's a really, really great point to bring up, David, because that seems to have been a going theme not only on this show but my Talking Sound podcast recently, of people saying that the key to their success, the key to them really hitting that next personal step, you know, that point of being, whether it's self-employed, what have you, that point of, I was my own worst enemy and I needed to get out of my own way.
Yes.
Chris, I'll give you one little success story for me.
Ahead.
Because I think it talks about the power of meditation and the power of some of this. I was 116 pounds heavier.
Wow.
The first day I started to meditate, and 52 weeks later, I lost 116 pounds.
Wow.
And part of that was I felt better about myself. Part of that is there's actually some physiological changes that happen when you meditate. It literally does lower your blood pressure, lower your cortisol, which and lower stress, all those things that make you eat and or hold on weight. And also part of it was Isabella, my spirit guide, kept saying, whatever you have to do to be your best self. And so I was able to say, well, so what? I've got electronic medical records. So what? I got a divorce. So what? I have to be healthy for me, because if I'm not healthy, I'm being selfish, because that means I'm leaving somebody else to take care of me.
Yeah.
And also, if I'm not taking care of myself, what kind of a good example am I for my patients?
Well,
and
and
so
how
my patients all started to go on diets.
Yeah, and how can you possibly be around to help the people that actively need your help?
Correct. And so it became almost easy. For 30 years I fought with my weight. And in a year I lost 116 pounds. And I started to walk. And yes, I ate a little better. But part of it was I was going to be better for me.
Yeah.
So that I could be better for others.
Yeah.
Because you can't give anything. And that's part of the message.
At this point, I would like to, I guess, pivot the conversation, Carla, to how do people get started with this? It is so daunting.
With meditation?
There's one thing to, like the good doctor's saying, to starting to get yourself feeling better, to starting to get yourself down the path of treating yourself right, treating yourself to feeling good and feeling right about things. But that's challenging enough for most people. But I think what most people want to know is, how do they get started on their path to finding this? How do they get started being able to find the quiet to meditate amongst the rabble of the day?
Like anything else, those who choose to work out, you make the time. If you make your bed or you brush your teeth or you shower, you've made that part of your everyday routine. Meditation needs to be that. You need to meditate religiously, because with religious meditation, you learn to quiet your mind. It is not easy. We don't all have the easy gift that Dave does, where you just close your eyes and that's it. It takes me a good 20 minutes every time I meditate to close my mind down and not think, did I turn the dryer off? What am I having for dinner? All of those things.
Yeah, the monkey
you need to
mind.
shut off. All of those things you have to shut off, and you have to take the time. And what could be better than sitting in utter quiet, not playing on your phone, the phone not ringing, you're listening to peaceful music and just breathing and stopping all of those thoughts. It's not easy in the beginning, but I promise you, if you do it religiously and you do it, like I said, you make it part of the schedule, like working out, like brushing your teeth, taking a shower, you will feel better. And the health benefits are so worth it. So many people say, oh, I can't sit still. Well, that's you fighting yourself.
Yeah.
Everybody can sit still. You're not a 2-year-old. You are capable. Just make your mind up to do it. It's how bad do you want it?
That is a absolute truth way to look at it. Because, I mean, even now, I've got a 3.5-year-old sleeping on the wall, across the wall from me over here. I own a couple businesses. I'm on the road constantly. But I take the time for the things that are important to me.
There you go.
Because they're important to me, and they are what make me whole.
Yes. Very good.
Without that, I'm not me, and without being me, I can't help other people. Like I said, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy, and you can either be a positive one or a negative one, one of the two.
That's right.
The decision is utterly yours. So, I guess
Chris,
go ahead.
You were talking about your own personal sort of religious experience or whatever you want to call it. And again, for me, meditation has been a religious experience.
Sure.
Not only because it changed me, not only because I learned about reincarnation, not only because after learning, much like you, I've had to do nothing but read constantly ever since because I want to know more, and because it's an experience for me with God.
Amen. Yeah.
So if my experience with God includes my meditation and my reincarnation, and it's not particularly dogmatic as far as church, but it still is my connection to my purpose, what I can do, how I could treat others. It becomes my way of life.
Well, and that's just it. And I think we in the society that we live in, especially here in America, lose and misuse the concept and the word religious.
Yes.
And
yes.
as well as mantra. And these are things that you do for yourself. You know, like I used to tell the kids at the end of every year whenever I taught that my teaching that year was one of the most selfish things I did. I loved it. Like, I loved it a lot. And it was the fact that I learned from them. Them challenging the answer in my class is what challenged me. So I, by default, learned more about the world around me through 20 students than those 20 students by conglomerate could have ever gleaned from me.
I understand
and that's because
that.
you chose to.
Yeah, and it really is that open channel of share of ideas, exchange of information, and being willing to go like, yeah, hey, I'm older than you. That does not mean I have the answer. Let's figure it out together.
Yes.
And with that concept in mind, Carla, how do people begin to walk down the path of discernment? I think that is probably the hardest part, is really to discern when it's happening, you know, and be able to discern the difference between dream and activity.
Well, a lot of people don't believe that it can happen, and
Sure.
that's because of the mainstream media and what you're taught, what churches teach you.
Sure.
That it's impossible to talk to God because God stopped talking to all of us.
Yeah, okay.
If you get on a lot of the reincarnation pages, the people have talked to God. It's common, but the people in the mainstream that do not get on these reincarnation sites and that are not open-minded, they turn a blind eye to it and they say, no, it's not happening. It can't be happening. If you think you're having an experience, you probably are.
Yeah.
And you should be journaling it. And if you're meditating and things start to happen, you will know when you start to change, when your thinking starts to change. You feel yourself change on the inside. And then all of those other things that you wonder are happening, you'll know what's real and what isn't.
And, you know, Chris, you talked a little bit earlier about Kabbalah, Jewish mysticism, Sufi mysticism. Thomas Merton was a Catholic monk who studied Zen Buddhism. If you go back in history and you look at the Christian, Catholic, Jewish mystics, they've been having some sort of a spiritual experience for 6,000 years. You know, we could talk about the Bible as a channeled work. if you want to.
Absolutely, because and that's just it. Like I myself, even with my music, I'm sitting here in front of a rack of equipment, and it's I've found very few people that I can write with because my process of writing is utterly experiential, and it is let's just play.
And don't you think that there's some way there, Chris, that you're really inspired?
Oh, sure. I mean, I've tried to explain to people forever the ecstatic experience of my music writing and the fact that I'm there moving things, but I'm not there. And
absolutely, and that's our experience too.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it is an ecstatic experience. It's something different, and so much so that the 4 or 5 times that I have been in studio with people, like my buddy Alan was there just recording one time, and he was like, whoa, like, it got really intense in here. And then I had friends that I recorded with in Maine that, wanted to come and do some experimental stuff with me, and we hit the studio for an afternoon, and they'd be like, wow, man, that was really, really weird. Like that was uncomfortable weird. But the couple people that I have been able to gel with and move with say the same thing, and then they ask, do you think we could make that happen again? And I'm like, oh, I guarantee you we can make it happen again. You want to try?
And Chris, I'm going to give you another thing to think about, because when you start to have all these experiences with reincarnation, you realize that you've been with the same soul group, soul family many times. They are either your family mates or your karmic mates, but you're with the same people in many of these lives. So maybe you've literally jammed that same way multiple times with those same people.
Well, and I definitely agree with that, because there are people that I've met in my life where we just know each other.
Correct. Everybody has that experience.
And these are my friends even to this day, 20-something years later, that
yes.
I still talk to. They are my soulmates. We know everything about each other. And it was just chance meeting. It was wild. And truly not chance meeting, old souls reuniting, I suppose. But
no such thing as coincidence.
I guess one question I would have before I let you guys go, is reincarnation within bloodline?
Lots of times.
Lots of times, but not definitely.
Okay.
Not always.
All right. Yeah, it's just a question that I've had for years. There were new, like I said, big Art Bell fan. That was one of the things that he would have guests on about all the time, is reincarnation within bloodline. And there are numerous cases out there that are really, really interesting. The young man who claims to be a World War II fighter pilot.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there's a lot of studies out there. We didn't get to talk about that, but I'm going to do it real quick.
Go ahead.
Because the research is out there. First of all, 33% of the world's population believes in reincarnation.
Wow.
The next part is there is studies by Ian Stevenson, Jim Matlock, and Jim Tucker that have been going on since 1960, where they have documented approximately 2,000 kids, and the stories have to be verifiable by a certain amount of scientific facts. And it's usually a story like this. There's a 3-year-old who says, what happened to my wife? She lived in such and such a town in a blue house on the corner. And the parents drive 35 miles to that town, and they drive up and down the street, and the kid says, it's that blue house right there. And they open the door, and she says, and the little boy says, Mabel, do you remember when you were my wife? And the lady almost faints. And
wow.
He says, Mabel, I left $4,000 upstairs under the floorboard. And the little boy runs upstairs, turns right because he knows where the bedroom is. He points to the fourth floorboard from the side. They dig up the floorboard, and there's $4,000.
You better be giving me half of that. Like,
there you go.
If I show up with my kid at your house and he points at a floorboard and says, "There's 4Gs in there," I want 2 of them.
And so, but those kind of cases, they've been writing about for years.
Oh,
and
absolutely, absolutely.
And so, it's very difficult to coach 3 and 4 year olds.
Yeah.
And so, that's where they put the research. They found some things that are in common with all of those 3 and 4 year olds. Then they looked at people who had near-death experiences, and many of the experiences that the little kids have are equal to the near-death experience people. And then I compare those to my experiences, and they're very much like the near-death experiences and the experiences of the 3 and 4 year olds. And then we did past life regression on people, and the experiences are much like the 3 and 4 year olds, much the NDEs. And so we get to a point where it appears that there's something in common.
Yeah, that there becomes a commonality within the storyline. And one of the reasons I asked, not only were those some of, I think, the most just flabbergasting stories of the lot, but I myself have a son who is the namesake of my grandfather, both of my grandfathers, Dalbus and James. And he has so many traits that are like, or great-grandfathers, that are like his great-grandfathers, whom he's never met. One died when I was in about 4th, 5th grade, the other when I was in 7th. So not even, like, my wife has never even met them. My wife has never met any of my grandparents. So it's just wild to see his mannerisms. How
old is he?
About 3.5.
So now is the time that you should ask him.
Oh yeah, and it's one of those I've said for years. Like, I will, me and my son will have conversations when it comes to what he sees, what he talks to, things like that. I have no problems. I have no qualms. But it's definitely one of those. This one's just weird. Like, some of the things that he says and does are just like, wow, okay. Some of the ways he sits and stands, the postures he has, are exactly the same.
So he's either your family mate or your karmic mate.
Yeah.
So he's back here to help you, or he's back here because you two need to get something right.
Or he's back for revenge. I'm sorry, I watch way too many movies.
He's going to get revenge just being your son.
Yeah, just this time it's personal. But for me, the topic of reincarnation it's been great to talk with you guys and demystify some of this stuff, because of course I've had conversations with people for years, and most of it for most people boils down to past life regression. And it's like, you understand that there is a whole different realm between reincarnation and past life regression.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
And to have you guys come on, dispel that, to really get into the meat of it and really crack that nut has been fantastic. I want to thank you guys so much for coming on, talking about this openly. I cannot wait for A, your next 2 books, B, to have you on again. When are the next 2 books expected? I hate to, like, pressure people, and be like, so you're going to get off stick and finish your books? But
they're done.
Oh, awesome. See, that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah. So we have
probably March or April.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, I want you to know that you were always welcome back on the show, especially once the books come out. We definitely want to help get word out there about you guys. Try to talk about this some more because the topic of reincarnation and past lives for me runs so deep. I really do think that it is something that more of us participate in than we know. And
I hope so.
It's something that we really need to explore in ourselves. And like we were making the analogy earlier, look at the reasoning why we filter reality the way that we do. And does that possibly have to do with past programming, with the literal base, the cosmic base with which we have built our temple that is us? So,
hey,
guys.
Chris?
Yes, sir.
Here, this is a plug for your show next week. But
okay.
You're going to have someone talk about trafficking. And when we went through the past lives that Carla's had, you literally find the history of women being abused, trafficking for thousands and thousands of years. And again, as a society, we're still trying to beat this. Wow. And as a society, we need awareness. So I'm glad you're going to have that on your podcast next week, because trafficking has followed Carla through many of her lives. It's one of those things that we've got to learn some lessons from our past. Yeah. And at least next week you're addressing it.
Absolutely. Well, thank you guys so much once again for coming on. Please do hold the line while we close things out. I'd love to talk with you once again off air while you're online. Of course, getting your copy of Past Lives, The Gift of Past Lives with Mother Isabella, God, and Elizabeth. Make sure to stop on by dudesandbeer.com. That is where you can find all the books by our guests. That is where you can find the Knowledge Vault as well, full of declassified programs, all kinds of good stuff. I highly recommend that you hop on over and download, let's see here, where to go. There it is, The Matrix Deciphered by Robert Duncan. That is a free ebook that squeaked out years ago, unbeknownst to him. He had written it, and before he was like, I don't know if I'm going to publish it or not. And it got out, and I got his permission. He was like, yes, absolutely. That is a great primer to our conversation in episode 300. So there it is in the Knowledge Vault for you guys. Stop on by, get your free copy today of The Matrix Deciphered by Robert Duncan. I guarantee you it will numb your mind, not just blow your mind, people. Some of the information that is in that while you're online checking out the Dudes and Beer podcast, please make sure to stop on by the HC Universal Network. That is our home network, everybody. Tons of great shows there. Yes But Why podcast, Scary Dad podcast, John Bound Politics, who does reports on here. All kinds of great stuff. HCUniversalNetwork.com. Until next time, take care of yourselves, take care of each other, and remember, if you can't be good, be good at it.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Dudes and Beer podcast. To listen to our audio streams or chat with us live, download the official Dudes and Beer app for Android and iDevices, available on Google Play and iTunes markets. For more episodes, content, and information, visit us online at dudesandbeer.com. You can also find our episodes on Breach.tv, iHeartRadio, Spreaker, SoundCloud, iTunes, YouTube, Stitcher, or your favorite podcast service. Dudes and Beer is a proud member of the HC Universal Network family of podcasts. For more about our sponsors and other podcasts on this network, visit hcuniversalnetwork.com. Thanks for listening, everybody, and until next time, drink responsibly.